The story begins with a man named Dan Morgan, our main character. Dan works at a luxury car showroom and he's quite popular among his coworkers. Why? Because Dan has a talent. He can effortlessly convince customers to buy even the most expensive cars like a Lamborghini. He's charming, persuasive, and seems to be living a perfectly normal suburban life. That day is special. It's Dan's anniversary. Holding a bouquet of roses, he heads home and surprises his wife, Jessica, with warm wishes. Dan lives with his wife, his daughter Nina, son Kyle, and their youngest child. He tells Nina and Kyle that he and Jessica are going out for the night and asks them to babysit their younger sibling. But Kyle complains. He says he's already sacrificed his gaming because of Dan and now he plans to hang out at his friend's place. So Nina takes responsibility for the little one. At this point, we learn an important detail. Dan's kids are keeping secrets from him. Nina has quit journalism for her boyfriend and Kyle is actually a popular online gamer, something Dan knows nothing about. Meanwhile, Dan and Jessica enjoy a peaceful walk in the park, reminiscing about the good old days. But things take a turn when a group of rowdy teens starts clicking pictures of them. Dan politely asks them to delete the pictures, but they refuse and even post them online. One of the boys goes as far as to throw a drink on Dan, humiliating him in front of Jessica. Dan says nothing and quietly leaves, but the insult clearly lingers in his mind. The next day, Jessica is at her boxing club where she befriends a girl named Gwen. Gwen shares her frustration about her boyfriend, while Jessica admits that although she loves her family, especially Dan, she feels stuck. She craves adventure, but Dan never takes her anywhere. Still, she's made peace with her life. Elsewhere, Dan is out shopping with his baby at a mall when suddenly a man attacks him out of nowhere. But Dan, with swift and calculated moves, takes him down with shocking ease. It's clear now, Dan is no ordinary man. Back home, Dan opens a hidden compartment, retrieving weapons, cash, and checking old passports, all expired. He quickly contacts an old friend and asks him to erase his family's digital records and photos. Someone named Mac has found him and Dan knows time is running out. Dan begins tracking down his kids. He first finds Nina and discovers she quit journalism 3 months ago. He then finds Kyle, catching him lying too. With no time to lose, Dan picks them both up and heads to Jessica's workplace. She's a physical therapist. He tells her that they're going on a surprise family trip to Vegas. Jessica is shocked. Dan has never taken them anywhere, but seeing his serious tone, she agrees. As they leave town, Dan notices men tailing them. Realizing a tracker is on his car, he diverts to a garage, plants the tracker in another car, and escapes undetected. But later, when his kids post online, Dan figures out how Mac is tracking them, through social media. In a panic, Dan throws all their phones off a bridge, leaving his family confused and shaken. But they have no idea who Dan truly is. The truth is, Dan was once a secret assassin, working for a man named Mac, eliminating targets for money. But when he realized Mac was making him kill good people, he left that life behind and disappeared. Meanwhile, Mac and his goons storm into Dan's old safe house, furious and determined to find him. Mac vows to locate Dan through online clues. Dan and his family stop at a shop to buy a map, then book a room at a lodge. But when a girl takes a picture with Kyle, a fan of his online gaming, Dan quickly cancels the stay and moves on, afraid the post might go public. With nowhere else to go, the family sleeps in the car that night. Only the youngest, Jack, stays awake and notices suspicious cars tailing them. Dan wakes up, lures the goons one by one, and silently eliminates them. Next morning, they reach Nina's boarding school. She wants to visit her boyfriend who stays nearby, but Jessica warns he might have moved. Still, Nina insists. As they wait, Dan notices a man staring at him. Thinking he's a threat, Dan confronts him, but the man turns out to be harmless. Suddenly, another real assassin attacks, and Dan swiftly kills him and returns to his family. Nina, meanwhile, finds her boyfriend cheating on her. Heartbroken, she returns to the car in tears. Dan comforts her, reminding her of a self-defense move he taught her. Empowered, Nina storms back, uses the move on her ex, and curses him out, feeling liberated and closer to her dad than ever. Jessica is impressed by Dan's support and calls him a great man. The family then checks into a posh Vegas hotel. Dan takes Jessica to a casino, asking the kids to stay in the room. His old friend has arranged new passports, and Dan is ready to tell Jessica the truth. At dinner, a waiter speaks French to them, and surprisingly, Dan responds fluently. Jessica is stunned. Dan reveals his secrets to her, in French, which she doesn't understand. They head back to the room where suddenly, an assassin breaks in and holds Jessica at gunpoint. He threatens her and the kids, but Dan kills him instantly and rushes to the gaming arena where the kids had sneaked out. Thankfully, the kids are safe. Dan tells them the truth. that he used to be a killer. They laugh it off, thinking he's joking. But just then, another group of killers attacks. Dan fights them off, saving his family yet again. Later in a cheap motel, Dan opens up fully. He shares that his mom died when he was young, he joined the army, and later worked for Mac. At first he believed he was doing good, but realized too late that he was killing innocents. So he faked his identity and started a new life. But now Mac's men are after him, and to protect his family, he arranged passports to get them to safety. But instead of trusting him, Jessica, Nina, and Kyle refuse to believe him. Jessica even calls Gwen to help them escape. Dan overhears it. The next morning, Dan wakes up to find his entire family gone. They've left him behind. Jessica meets Gwen, who arrives in a private plane. Jessica believes Gwen is helping her, unaware that Gwen is actually working for Mac, Dan's old boss. Once on board, Gwen pretends to support Jessica but soon drugs her unconscious. Nina and Kyle are also sedated. Jack, the youngest, is too small to realize what's happening. Meanwhile, Dan wakes up in the motel, alone. He finds a note left by Jessica saying they're going back to their normal life. Panic sets in. Dan knows Mac will strike and his family just walked right into danger. He rushes out to find them. Using his skills, Dan hacks into airport surveillance and finds footage of Gwen taking his family. With urgency in every step, Dan breaks into a high-security base where he knows Mac's private jet lands. Inside, Dan is confronted by Mac's guards. But this is where we truly see the old Dan return, the skilled assassin. He fights through an army of men, taking down each one with precise, brutal efficiency. Mac is waiting. Dan finally reaches him and demands the release of his family. But Mac is smug. He tells Dan that he's trained a new assassin, one even deadlier than Dan, and this person will kill Dan tonight. The new assassin enters, a young man, lean and confident, with no mercy in his eyes. A brutal hand-to-hand fight begins. Dan is no longer in his prime, and the younger man seems to have the edge. But Dan uses experience, strategy, and grit, finally overpowering him in a clever and violent move that knocks him out cold. Now face-to-face with Mac, Dan makes his final threat: stay away from my family. Mac tries to manipulate him, says Dan was his greatest creation. But Dan has had enough. He shoots Mac dead, ending the nightmare. Dan quickly finds Jessica and the kids, still drugged, and escapes with them before backup arrives. He gets them to safety, and they finally see the truth. Jessica realizes everything Dan told them was real. The lies, the secret past, the danger, all of it. And more importantly, they see just how far Dan is willing to go to protect them. Later, in a quiet moment, Jessica and Dan sit together. She tells him that even though he lied, she understands now why he did it. Dan promises no more secrets. They embrace, closer than they've been in years. As for Kyle and Nina, their relationship with their father is transformed. Kyle admires him now, and Nina appreciates his honesty and strength. Even little Jack calls him a superhero.